students. That was really interesting. Also, thank you, Queen Claire, again. We have time for questions now. Is there anyone who wants to get started with a question for our panelists? Yes, sir.
When you're looking at such a fragmented landscape of owners, how far back are you having to do title research, and how tough is it to get boundaries on properties?
It actually depends. We have deeds, some deeds, most deeds are in the early 1900s, well, closer to the 1950s. But we have had occasions where they go back to the 1800s, and those are the cases that are more difficult to resolve because there could be 200 plus heirs involved in resolving the issue. And as I said, 9 times out of 10, the issue has really nothing to do with the land, but some family dynamic that was never addressed. And that's really what makes it hard. So since our inception, we've cleared title to 128 titles, valued about $6.4 million. And we started officially as a nonprofit in 2005.
And interestingly enough, I was almost shocked when she just said that about the 1900s, because all the deeds that I've ever looked at, all of our deeds date back, including my own, to 1862. So when I started working with Jenny and also others who were first part of developing the heirs property, the set of heirs property, we were looking at those, and like she said, it becomes more complex further back you go, because the whole family's on the deed from that generation.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming. This is an absolutely magnificent presentation. And
Thank
we're
you
so grateful. As Executive Director, I just want to thank you so much for being here. What occurs to me is, the question that occurs to me is, can you talk a little bit more about the earlier history of this land, how the Gullah people came to be on the land, and what was the status of the land when you got here?
Excellent question, especially based on the first one. To give background, first of all, many people may not have understood or grasped or known, but our ancestors were the people who were brought over during transatlantic slave trade. So more often than not, I'm asked that same question. Well, how did they go from being chattel to owning property when they were considered property themselves? Especially when I say things like we have deeds dating back to 1862. People are like, mind-boggling about that. But what happened in this region, and in particular in this city started the U.S. Civil War. All right? What many call the war brother against brother, and Southerners still call the war of northern aggression. Started here. So, as a result of it, many of the Anglo people who had been the enslavers of the African people, who now are called Gullah Geechee, abandoned the area. When they abandoned the area, they abandoned all their property. There came a law called the U.S. Confiscation Act. That Confiscation Act that took all property for non-payment of taxes. Same thing Jenny and I deal with now, why people lose property now, non-payment of taxes. So here it is, houses, silverware, clothes, shoes. People could have been sold, but they didn't. Mules, carts, everything was sold. Because now this area was abandoned by Anglo people and Gullah Geechees were here, Gullah Geechees had an opportunity when they started up land auctions to actually be part of the people who bid at those auctions. Many of our ancestors had the wherewithal, as Jenny mentioned earlier, the insight, the vision to actually have the forethought to say, I'm going to bid on this land because I want to leave something to my family. So our deeds, that's why I made that statement to the gentleman. The whole family's on it. Our deeds will say, let's say that like there's a good wine in there, and I'm a good wine. Let's say it was Moses Goodwine, his wife name was Esther Goodwine, and they were the people who had been enslaved. They bought it, but they had 16 children at the time. All 16 of those children's names are on it. And they raised one of their nephews. The nephew's name is on it. And the final line says, and their heirs. So we ended up with the property, but it was supposed to be property passed down to the heirs, hence the name heirs property. So the status of the land, when I got mine, I had two different pieces. I have one with the title clear, and it had to do with a destruction company trying to build next to us, and us going to court, and then bringing to court everybody alive and dead, and then as a result of that whole transaction, our title got clear. I have another piece where it's a family compound, so all of us still live on it together, but then it's split in 1 acre each, where each person has a name on it. So I have worked with my elders in my family to make sure they have wills, so that when they do pass, no time soon, God forbid, that they pass their land down in the way that needs to be probated properly, so that again it doesn't become heirs property all over again. So that's kind of where the status is. And I think a lot of families have a mixture, like I have on my father's side one thing, on my mother's side another.
I would just make the further observation here that there's huge parallels between this and the allotted lands on much tribal land, much American tribal land in the U.S. Very, very similar issues.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am?
I have a question about the heirs property that's located down there in the Ace Basin area. Because I know there's a lot of conservation easements down there, and there's a lot of conservation action, and there may be differing philosophies about land between heirs property landowners and these conservationists down there, or there may be similarities. I just wondering if you could speak on the dynamics of that in that area.
Typically, African Americans didn't believe in, they were fearful of conservation easements. The Associated Press back in 2002 did a multiple article titled "Torn from the Land," and it talked about how African Americans in particular lost their land. And the whole fact that you start talking about a conservation easement in the past, people thought, oh, because remember now, people would lose their land, someone would say, oh, I'm going to help you take care of this if you sign this piece of paper for me. So the fact that you want me to sit down and you just didn't grasp the concept because they thought they were losing their land, so they really did not embrace conservation easements. But under our particular, and I forgot to give you this disclaimer, I'm not an attorney, and I promise I don't even play one on TV. But just so I'm giving you layperson's perspective. And so we've held a lot of educational workshops through our forestry program where we invited those conservation groups that don't typically interact with minority communities to these workshops so that the families in the community could learn them, be exposed to what it means to really have a conservation easement. And currently we have I won't say two families because one of them is a group of families, but we have two separate entities that they've been offered, I think, up to $2.2 million in a conservation easement. And as I said, it's being negotiated because some of the family members, they don't understand the concept conservation easement, so they're less likely to, even though they're being offered $2 million, they're saying, well, I don't really think so. So education is really key, and also being exposed to someone who looks like you, who has maybe engaged in or undertaken a conservation easement. Because you're right, initially, the conservation groups in that area, they didn't really look at the heirs property owners because they're like, oh, it's not cost effective for us to place conservation easements on these properties. But if you were to put up the Ace Basin map, what's left to be conserved is what? It is the land of these minority folk. And so if they really want to fulfill their vision, we're now working together so these families can learn about conservation easements, and if they choose to have a conservation easement in place, they can.
Yes, sir, Richard?
Yes, I wanted you to speak about your experience in establishing a heritage corridor, the Geechee Heritage Corridor, the current status of that, and your goals for that heritage corridor.
Very interesting ethical question. The status of it is it exists. So it took 9 years of my life working shoulder to shoulder, climbing the hill, even in low country to climb a hill, to actually work with Congressman James Clyburn to get a Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor established, where people were saying, they tell me to my face now, but they were saying it behind my back, that they actually thought I was insane, that they did not believe that the U.S. federal government was going to acknowledge, literally they said this, a group of black people down south, much less a funny talking group of black people down south, because they knew nothing of us, and this was not a priority. So it was not an easy job by any stretch of the imagination. The college house, one of the people in the audience that can attest to just how many petitions, how many online petitions, how many written petitions, how many meetings. I went around the communities and got a grassroots movement through the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition to push to get it done. And just the other day in our archive, we have the only archive in the world totally dedicated to Gullah Geechee history, heritage, and culture. I saw the cover of Heritage Matters, which the National Park Service, I think, used to produce. I think now they don't have the funding for it. And on the cover, they thank the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition for the work where that corridor actually got established. What happened the day that it happened in 2006 was I got a phone call to tell me your bill is now on its way to the White House to be signed. It is a national heritage area. It's been since 2006. So when I got that call, I said, okay, that's very good. You call me back when it's signed, and it's signed without disappearing ink. And then we'll go from there. So a few hours later, I got a call back. It is now signed by the President, George W. Bush of the United States. So to be very clear, who was the president. Again, people said, we have no idea how you did it. I said, you ask God, because God told me to go do this, and it's done. So a lot of people to this day don't realize that it was the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Act that passed. That act that created a national heritage area, which is the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor. As a person who was a visionary behind it, who passed up the concept and had worked with the National Park Service on the National Underground Railroad Network to freedom and getting it established, and worked daily, day and night, with the congressmen and others to get it done. My vision was always that it be what a national heritage area is supposed to be. A grassroots partnership from the ground up that empowers the particular area that it represents. And in this case, it is the only national heritage area that is for people of African descent. It became the 37th NHA that existed, and it was the first one for a living culture. So we were an anomaly, still are in some regards, and so I want it to be something that people understand that it is what it was established to be, and that is to empower the Gullah Geechee people to maintain their culture and sustain it here on this land and be able to continue it into for future generations, while people also now know more about our existence and the fact that we are a part of the American history story. And that was why all those years, that 9 years plus another 6 that I served on it, it continued. It has one more year to have a commission. The Corridor Commission is to end in 2016. But the National Heritage Area, which is the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor, should continue to go on forever. And my vision is that as it goes on, people don't just look at signs and say, oh, I'm driving through something, but that you actually come to businesses, communities, to the festivals that are done by the native Gullah Geechee people themselves, and financially, economically, spiritually support us, so that we will continue to be able to maintain who we done down here, and other children can come visit and things like that, sit for the reals and then have ET, and then go out on back where you come from.
So I think we have time for, thank you, Queen. We have time for one more question. Well, I actually have a question for you, Dr. Stevens, regarding basically how the economics of the forestry programs work for the benefit of the heirs. Like how much time does it take? Like how much of a time investment is it for them How much education does it take in order to run a forestry program on their property? Could you give some more details on that?
Yes. So I already said I'm not a lawyer, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not a forester either, and I don't play one. But basically what our point is that we started out with educational workshops that we offer quarterly to our landowners. Exposing them to USDA, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, to learn about, they were called cost share programs, but now they're like financials, I forgot what the term is, financial assistance programs, where landowners can actually get, because they are considered, that they have a particular designation, and I may get this wrong, I think they can get up to 90% reimbursement for some of the activities on their property. Sometimes they break even, sometimes they may actually have a little money left over. What we have done, and I'll just give you an example of our landowners, usually the majority of our families, and we're working with right now a total of 71 families, and probably all of them have not really been managing their land. So the first step is just, in some cases, to clear cut the timber. So they're receiving proceeds and from the sale of the timber. It may not be as much because they didn't properly manage the land, but it's still, for give you an example, we had one lady who owns 200 plus acres. She was first offered $90,000 for all of this, to cut her timber, and she had attended one of our workshops, so she decided to call us. And we connected her with a professional forester in the area, and now, well, actually she signed a contract for a little over $400,000. So part of it, and some, if the acreage is significant enough, families are accessing money that, we had one family owner, he was about to lose his property. So it really depends upon the scenario of the family. So we're making sure that we're providing free education, connecting them, if it's about the timber to markets, and in some cases, it's really about, I'm told that it takes 15 years to get your first crop from trees. So it's a big, you're planting a big garden, but it just takes a little longer. It's not like tomatoes or cucumbers or those things, but it takes a while. So we're providing our families with those options. So in some cases, it's money right now that they may need, but really growing trees is a long-term investment. And it's really not about you, but it's about the generation who's coming behind you, because we're also teaching them to replant.
Awesome, thank you. This has been great, and I just wanted to let you, oh yes, quick question.
I just wanted to say one, but I think you were about to do the same thing. I was going to ask you.
Well, as Tom comes up, because I think he might want to say something additional, I know that Queen, you have a panel at 1:30 today,
Yes.
so you can hear more from Queen Quet and some of her partners at 1:30 today.
3 o'clock, that I'll also be part of Elder Colin Carroll. So people have an opportunity to actually meet and greet and share in the circle with Gullah Geechees and some of our partners in sustainability. And then on tomorrow, where you see the film that's listed for Hero Crispin, I'm also a part of that film about the Edison River. So that's in the afternoon segment. That's the 3 o'clock segment. Jen is in the morning with forestry. Yes, so this is not the last time, like we told you, we just getting started.
Yes, so please join Queen Quet and Dr. Stevens at their other panels. I hope that you will, and I hope that I'll be able to attend as well. Thank you both so much. You were really excellent. Thank you.